And so on the way back up to the house one day, I thought we're just walking back to the house. We've already made our whole walk. And so I took them off their leashes because we were walking back to the house. Dude, they took off like someone shoved electric up their rear. I'm not kidding you. They were gone for hours. And I'm like, oh my God. I think I just lost the dogs. I was like panicking, full bore panic. Because I'm like, I don't know where they're at. I don't know how to find them. I don't know how to get them back. They eventually all came back, but I was like, holy crap. Okay, never off the leashes till we get back to the house. Now you guys cannot be trusted.
Oh my gosh.
Welcome to another episode of Expat Diaries podcast. And today we are in Costa Rica visiting with Monique Claudio, depending on how you want to pronounce it. And, it's always fun. My husband always tells me, like, you just fall in love with every one of your guests because, like, I just get so involved in their story of how they made their transition down to Costa Rica. And each one is so different that it's always just so much fun for me to explore. And so it may look like there's like some funky screensaver behind her, but that's not. She's sitting in a restaurant. And most of the restaurants, if you haven't been to Costa Rica, a lot of the restaurants are outdoor, open air restaurants, and you're literally just sitting out there amongst nature while you're eating or hanging out. So welcome. I'm glad to have you here.
I'm glad to be here.
Yeah. So let's just jump in right off the bat and go, okay, so how did you, first of all, I know your first visit to Costa Rica was in 2017, but like, how did you decide, like, I think I'm going to make a trip to Costa Rica? What was that catalyst?
We have to go further back in time. In about 2014, I had one of those epiphany moments that I wanted to travel more, that I wanted to, explore things that were at that time not part of my compartmentalized box of, American grind life.
Right.
And luckily, I had always been self-employed. And then 2015, I was literally sitting in traffic on my way to a personal training gig, probably have just finished teaching a class, barely like changed out of sweaty clothes into another set of workout clothes, sitting in traffic in burnout. And just like there was this moment of surrender where I felt like this deep fatigue and just started crying and went, I got to go to Nepal because of someone I had met earlier in the year who happened to be trekking in Nepal. And they were doing some nonprofit work. And I eventually actually went to Nepal and did some volunteer work there. So that started and set in motion this way of being that was focused more on what is it I want to go understand and what could I learn from another culture. And what really brought me to Costa Rica the first time was acro yoga.
What is
that? Starting in about... It's a combination of acrobatics and partner yoga.
Oh, wow.
So if you've ever seen all over the internet, now it's gotten like where people even spoof it who don't know what they're doing on YouTube and Instagram, where someone's balancing on someone's feet or, two people are creating a balance off of each other. I've been a movement coach, personal trainer, life transformer since I was a teenager and actually worked in personal training and movement most of my adult life, pretty much my whole adult life. So I came to acro yoga around the same time I was deepening into yoga teaching and bringing different practices to my clients. And I was in Philadelphia. So I lived in Delaware at the time. I lived in Delaware through college and beyond. And a friend of mine in the acro yoga community who was a professor at a local university in Philadelphia, I that year didn't make it to any of the events for what's called the Philly Flight Fest, which is one of the many acro festivals that exist now in the world. Mm-hmm. And she just said, hey, come to there's like a little happy hour thing at this bar. Why don't you come meet up with us? There's this guy here. He kind of lives the life that you want to live. I think you should meet him. And he's a guy who's lived here for the better part of about 30 years, grew up in New Jersey, had been a lifeguard and traveled the world. And he was hosting an event that had a lot of acro yoga in it. And that's how I ended up here the first time. It was just for a week-long event. I had no idea. Costa Rica wasn't on my radar. I was actually even a little averse to it because, you know, I had a bit of a chip on my shoulder that I'm more humble and I'm interested in things that are really like deeply rooted in values. And Costa Rica is one of those countries that people go on vacation and sit by a pool with a drink. So to me, it was,
which is funny because it really isn't. Like there's very few touristy areas.
Yeah. And you know, those are curated experiences that I just hadn't had any exposure. Yeah. So I spent actually a month in Nicaragua first and then flew here. I was interning for a woman who had a retreat center in Nicaragua. And there was just some things going on there that felt a little not right for my value system. I know she was in quite a transition. I was witnessing some closet drinking and just some things that felt a little off to me. So I know when we talked last week, you had asked me some specific questions and you asked me like, why Costa Rica? Why did I choose Costa Rica? And I said, I didn't choose it. It chose me.
Right.
So I was in a shuttle from the airport and we were just stopped at a gas station, I think. And I had this moment where I was just in tears. And I tried to play it off. Oh, it's stress. Oh, it's the transition of travel. But it really was this physical response to whatever the energy is here, the nature and Mother Nature herself kind of calling me home. I didn't know it at the time. It took me a while to really ground that experience in.
Yeah. And I felt like I was telling you, like I felt the same way, like, and just like, I'm probably the polar opposite of you, meaning like I'm an entrepreneur and I'm business driven and I'm like A-type personality. I'm like all of the anti chill, like I am, like I thrive under pressure. I'm saying like, that's just who I am. And so like one time in particular, when I came down by myself, I had just finished speaking at a national automotive conference. And, you know, the prep time that goes into it ahead of time, and then you're doing it. Is anybody going to show up at my session? All of the crap, you know, all of the prep work that goes into it. And so then I left that conference and literally I flew straight from Las Vegas, to Costa Rica. And I was just like, so grateful to be home. Like I felt like I was home and it was just like a detox of chaos that I got to just flush this crap out of my system. And so where you're where you're probably a lot more in tune with the way that you want to show up in the world or in, I literally just stomp through life, right? Like I'm not spatially aware. I'm just constantly like, what do I got to get done? You know, I'm that person. And so for me to have even had that same experience, like I remember sending my daughter a picture, like I was literally crying. And I there's not even a movie that I've ever watched ever in my entire 60 years that I've ever cried at. Like I've not cried at a movie ever. And so I sent her this picture. I'm like, I don't know what's wrong with me. Like, I can't stop crying. And she's like, are you sad? I'm like, no, I'm just super happy, like to be somewhere calm and peaceful and to be like detoxing of all of this crap.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting too, because I think I'm actually, you know, more alike to you than different. But you just made a really good point. There's a certain frequency, there's a certain pace of life that is in tune with nature. And then there's one that's more in tune with imposed systems that we all participate in to a certain extent.
I agree.
And it can be very confronting when there's a restoration of the pieces of us that have been neglected or have been tapped down, that are part of how we function as organisms, as living ecosystems.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's so funny because like it can all seem like, oh, it's all like woo-woos, touchy-feely, whatever. But it's like not like we all, like if you even go back to like even some of the basic stuff that we need as a physical being on this earth, like grounding is super important. People don't understand. Like literally you've got to be grounding. You've got to be breathing. like not just surviving, but like breathing. Your body and your tissues, your muscles need oxygen. And are you being conscious about how you're breathing on the daily? You know, like, do you find yourself like holding your breath because you're just like in that stressful situation? You're putting all of this stress on your organs and your tissues, everything. Like, and we don't even think about those things because we're just going to the next thing. And when you get to someplace like probably like Nepal or like Costa Rica or even like Nicaragua, like you're just forced to just like let it all out, release, like, and slow the hell down, like just slow down.
Yeah. And even, you know, I've been to places, you know, for example, Nepal, you enter through Kathmandu. It's chaos as far as the traffic, you know, and anybody who's been to India or Thailand or any of these places where you're in the bigger city or the city that's the central point, it's not necessarily even about slowing down. It's about getting out of your routine so that you can see it from a different perspective. Mm-hmm. And that's the one thing I will say about being in countries like Costa Rica, where we have, you know, a partial first world experience here. Mm-hmm. We have the internet, we have credit card processing, we have some roads that are paved, we have cars we can drive, but being confronted with the aspects of it that require human intervention on a regular basis and require communication or even a recognition of nature. The amount of time something like a landslide might happen or a flood from the rains coming really fast, there's a little bit more of a connection to the immediacy of what actually requires our heartbeat to be racing versus the, like you said, the entrepreneurial world can become, you know, it can be a beautiful thing to be that driven, but it could also be something that could drive you to your own destruction.
I even think about sometimes, like I would come down the mountain, like to go into town and just pick up a few groceries. When I come back, a tree has fallen over the road, right? And so it's one of those things where you can be like, oh my gosh, what do I do now? But you don't even have to think about it because you stop, everybody else stops. Someone's got a chain. Somebody is pulling the tree. Everyone else is helping push it off the road. And everybody's like going to open it back up again. It's not like we're waiting on the city to show up and fix us. You know, everyone just goes, oh, this is all our responsibility. Let's do this thing. And that happens more often than you would think. That, I mean, it's happened to me probably 3 times. Like I literally left the house, went into town to get something, come back, and there's a big ass tree laying across the only road there is to get to the house.
Yeah. I had 6 flat tires one time in a 2-week period, specifically because a builder, you know, somebody who was building a house really negligently, and the construction workers were just leaving nails on the road. It took me a while to figure that out, but at least two of those were in the driveway, so I changed them myself. But when I was out on the road, the amount of times I was pulled over and about to start changing the tire, and somebody stopped and somebody helped. And at least 2 of those times, somebody said, no, I got this. I'll do it for you. So that's something that's not as common in some of the places we come from.
Well, that's USA 1975. So, you know what I'm saying? And it's so funny because I grew up in California and I'm a child of the 60s, but raised in the 70s. And the first time that I actually came to, not necessarily the first time I came to Costa Rica, because the first time I came to Costa Rica, we were up in like the Nasara area. And I mean, that's just like being in like freaking Jurassic Park or whatever. But like whenever I came to like, I think Dominical or Uvita or any of those little communities along then, like back in the, you know, mid-teens, like, you know, 14, 15, 16, it felt to me like California 1975. Like it just felt like that vibe. And I was like so attracted to that, to the, I didn't just grow up in California. I grew up in Bakersfield, California. So we were like, produce everywhere. Like it was like the San Joaquin Valley was like so fertile. There's like so much lettuce and grapes and everything that you can imagine that grows there. And so then to come here and then go, oh my gosh, there's like an abundance of fresh fruit and vegetables. Like that was my childhood, was like just never having to worry about anything to eat because it was all just right there. Everything was right there. You just pull over the side of the road and just get whatever you wanted out of any of the fields that were like right there. Like it probably wasn't legal. I don't know about that, but that's what we did. And that's something that I was really attracted to, like that little kind of step back in time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely a bit of a step back in time, which sometimes can be a little overwhelming for sure. I took a step back in time with where my budget was when I first was, living here and staying. It happened during COVID. And I had a friend help me sell my car in the United States because, the world was at a moment in time that didn't always feel so safe. And in fact, I think at one point the borders here were closed if you tried to come back in. So I didn't want to chance that. I had a dog. So I had this friend help me sell a 2010 Honda CRV. And I made, with the money that I paid him for helping me out, in the end, I made under $4,000, like about $3,500 on that car. And I drive a 1999 Suzuki Vitara that cost me closer to $7,000 here.
Right.
So talk about stepping back in time. It's literal.
Yeah, for sure. It's funny because so one of the things that we're thinking about like right now is because we bought our property down in Golfito, and because we bought property now with how the laws have changed, now we can bring in a container, we can bring in a vehicle now. Like we're not having to pay all of this duty on it that we would have had to before. And I'm like, okay, now what vehicle do we want to bring in? You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm like going, what do I want to drive there? And my husband has, I bought him for Christmas a couple of years ago. I think it was 2019, 2020, right before COVID. I bought him a Ford Ranger 4-wheel drive pickup, right? And it's smaller, so it's going to be more fuel efficient. And I'm like, I think he only has like 60,000 miles out. I'm like, are we going to bring Brian's truck down, or do I want to purchase something different to bring down? And I'm just like, because I don't want to, if I can bring it in and don't have to be buried in, what the duties and the taxes are on importing that, then I'm like, great, that's fantastic. Pick what you want. But also I'm smart enough to know, like, don't bring something bougie down there. You want something with a good suspension, that it doesn't cost a lot of money to replace your tires because you're going to be doing that. It's not expensive to work on. And do they have parts readily available?
Can they get the parts, right? Or are you going to have to bring it in a suitcase, or are you going to have to, pay the duty on the part because you have to get it shipped in from somewhere, unless you want to wait, several months for the repair to be done and go without the car.
But I had already purchased a car. I purchased a vehicle down there in, let's see. I think it was 2018. And I purchased this guy had moved from Canada down there like years before and drove this vehicle from Canada down. And it was a Toyota Land Cruiser. And
those are great. Yeah.
Yeah. But like he'd had it there for a hot minute. And so like I only paid $5,000 for it. And it was 4-wheel drive, but it was like lockout hubs. It wasn't like you push a button or do a thing. Like you
got to get out of the car and turn that baby.
This is the funniest damn story. So, my best friend, Beverly, and I, so I'm married. She has a fiance, but my husband was working in Alaska. And so we had leased a place in Uvita, up on the mountain. And we knew we needed to get a vehicle. So anyway, purchased this vehicle. And she was there whenever we went and test drove it and looked at it. And he was like, and we went to his house, and he's like, showed us how to use the 4-wheel drive, showed us how everything. And then I told him because I think we're on Escaleras. I'm not sure. Anyways, okay. He's like, I don't think that you're going to need 4-wheel drive to get up yours. But he goes, but he showed us how anyways. Right. So I'm like, okay. So I took Beverly back to the airport because she was flying back. And by the time I was getting to go back to Las Brisas, which is where my place I was leasing was at, it had gotten dark. And so I'm going up this freaking mountain, and he's convinced me that I can do it in 2-wheel drive. Like it'll be fine. Like that, my mountain is probably the steepest one, and blah, blah, blah. So I'm like going up this mountain, and there's service at the bottom and there's service at the top. There's no service in the middle. There's probably only a total on this whole road that I go up. There's probably only a total of probably 10 houses up here, and they're all not on it. They're like off another dirt road, down a dirt road, whatever. And so I'm getting up. I get up to this one point, and I'm like, I'm spinning out, and I'm like, shit. I'm going to need the 4-wheel drive. Well, he had printed me off instructions too. So I'm on this incline. It's pitch black. Like there's not even a moon out. It is so damn dark. And I'm like, I got both my feet on the brake because I'm just like trying to figure out what the shit to do here. And I've got my flashlight on my phone and I'm like reading the instructions again. And I'm like, push this button. Okay, pull it into neutral. Okay, now do this thing right here. Okay, pull the emergency brake. Get it, because now I'm supposed to get out and now I'm supposed to like do the lockout hubs. And so in my mind, because I don't pay a lot of attention, like if I read something, I'm a scanner. Like I listen to the point where I think I understand what they're talking about, and then I tune out. Like it's a horrible character flaw, excuse me. And so I do the one on the driver's side, and I get in, and I put it in gear again, and it like kills the engine. I'm like, what the crap? Standing on the brake again, going through all the steps again. I got the flashlight out. I'm doing it again. I'm like, shit. Like I just keep killing it. And I'm like, I wonder if there is a lockout hub on the other side too. So here I am going around to the other. I was only doing one of them the whole time. So I finally go around to the other one. I'm like, oh hell, that's probably the problem. And then I just got all the way up the mountain. And I'm like, literally, I was so freaked out and frustrated because I thought I was just going to slide off the side of the mountain. And I get up there. And I called Beverly and I'm like, if anybody ever wondered if I am a fucking badass, I am. I just made up this mountain screaming the whole way. I was pretty sure I was going to die on that mountain that day. But then I was like, then I knew how to run the thing. So, but that thing had rotten rubbers all the way around. Like it leaked everywhere. And we had to drill holes in the bottom of the doors so that the water that came in at the windows, because otherwise you got to shut. You can't. It's so heavy you couldn't shut it. It was like so my husband
I first rented.
So the water would come out.
Yeah. Similarly, I first rented here and decided I was going to learn how to drive stick shift here on those roads. Okay. I never learned how to drive stick shift when I was younger. I drove an 87 Samurai. It's basically like a sardine can on wheels. And it had no shocks. The back seat wasn't bolted down, so I could have friends in the back seat, but every time we go up the hill, they were back. And I drove on roads and had experiences, and it's almost like there should be a checklist of initiation if you choose to be here a long term of like, okay, have you used a machete? Have you gotten someone to help you out of a ditch? Have you had something on your car fail right at the scariest moment? It really is.
Have you had to use WhatsApp video to send to some mechanic to show them what it's doing and then hope that they will speak English? At this point, there's actually the main mechanic I work with is an import himself, because that can be an entire podcast unto itself about that. Ultimately, there is no one who is trained or licensed in a way that we're used to in the United States. And so it's pretty much everyone's MacGyver, which is great for like little things that get you back on the road. But for actually taking good care of your car, it means we have to be advocates and informed consumers. And essentially, it's kind of like a lifetime of education in a very short amount of time. And a lot of us have learned the hard way. I love it, though. I mean, it's like one of those things that we go back to, like, instead of all of the conveniences that we're used to, like, I mean, I don't know, like I work in the automotive industry, and there's times whenever I'm talking to a mechanic somewhere and I'm like, yeah, I think you're full of crap. I don't know if any of that makes sense to me. So I'm a little distrustful of the entire mechanic thing anyways, but that's neither here nor there. So now where are you living at now? In Ojochal?
Yeah, I'm currently living in Ojochal.
And what do you do there for fun / income?
Are those two separate questions?
Well, hopefully they're the same. Hopefully what you do for fun, it brings you money. Who knows?
Yeah. I mean, my whole life, I've always been kind of a patchwork of, like, before there was a gig economy, I had my own gig economy. And I've always found a way to support myself with a combination of the skills that I have, right? Any education that I've amassed, along with, being humble and willing to put in sweat equity or do whatever it takes. So that's no different. In fact, probably it makes me more available to a place like this when other people might give up. I've seen it. You've probably seen it. People are like, this is it. I'm moving here. They load up the container. They come, and 6 months later, they're moving somewhere else.
Yeah.
So I've been working most of my adult life as a personal trainer. When I decided to stay during COVID, I had one client who I said, hey, I could still work with you virtually. I've been working with him. He's in his 80s. I've been working with him for over 15 years. I still see him twice a week online for 30 to 45 minutes each session.
Nice.
So that's helpful to me. And then, at the beginning of my time here, I kind of like took a step back from working because I've been working in some capacity with very small breaks ultimately since I was about 13 years old, in addition to high school, in addition to college. So I kind of took a little bit of a step back from focusing on supporting myself. And luckily I had some investments I could live off of, but it's been really interesting. I entered into an apprenticeship program, like a training and apprenticeship for to be a life coach toward the mid-end of 2020. I think it began like August 2020. And one of the clients I had been working with in person in Philadelphia in a modality that I'm trained in for pain and mobility and the health of the nervous system and the connective tissue in the body. She reached out to me the day that I was deciding whether I was going to, follow through with this program and go on a payment plan. And she said, I think you could help me. I need a coach. And so I had my first client, and I was doing that pretty consistently for the better part of 2020 until mid 2023. And kind of had to take a step back and realize that the way I was going about things was not sustainable. I was doing, some friends who run retreats sometimes would hire me to come in and do workshops and or do trained in Thai massage. So I would offer the things that I do, and those things paid well, but they weren't consistent work. And the life coaching was going well, but all of my clients were referral from each other. And any money I invested in a business coach, in promoting my offerings online, in creating content that would, capture people or help educate them, there was no return on that investment. And the funny thing is, this conversation about cars, I decided because I had a little bit of money in the bank at the time and my debt seemed manageable. I thought about buying a second car to rent out. And I made the key mistake that a lot of people make, regardless of what country you live in. I trusted a friend who maybe wasn't being as honest with themselves, regardless of me. And they sold me a lemon. And I'm still figuring out now how to unload that car. So that sent my finances in the wrong direction. But my cost of living and the way I've been living is more like your average, like rural Tico than your average educated gringo. Example, until recently, I was renting a house that all in utilities, rent, I was paying less than $600 a month. And, only eating for the most part, like I eat out sometimes, but mostly eating from local farms that I know at the local feria. I don't buy a lot of things. This sports bra is 5 years old. I bought a new pair of shorts 4 months ago. So, I've kept my lifestyle modest. One of the things I have done my whole life is also volunteer work. I don't measure my quality of life only in my bank account. I measure it based on the health of my nervous system, the health of my relationships, my relationship to nature. So you asked about some of the things that I find fun. I like to go to ecstatic dance in Uvita. There's a gathering every week. When I lived in Philadelphia, I went to a gathering every other week that some friends had created. Ecstatic dance is a really beautiful way to self-express, and also it can be a form of somatic therapy. So that's something that I do on a regular basis. Going to the beach, live right near the beach, playing in waterfalls, moving my body, and self-development. really looking at our own wounds and shadows and where we're holding ourselves back. I find that fun in a really like maybe masochistic way of recognizing that I need less to be happy,
Right.
or to recognize that happiness is not my barometer for whether my life is good. It's more, can I be an asset to my community? Can I stand in whatever's going on with me, ask for the help that I need, and or be the help someone else needs because I've gone there before them. So yeah, so a piece of that that's a somewhat controversial topic is one of the other things that brought me here was working with plant medicines.
Okay.
Like ayahuasca and some of the things that are not indigenous to Costa Rica by any means, but it's kind of a hub here for that. And I would say there is so much about it that's blown up in the last decade. Some of the people I know who have been here for 2 to 3 decades, I've been listening to different conversations and aware of how it affects the community. Thankfully, I believe I've found the people that are really, really devoted and rooted to it being something that is an integrated relationship with the planet, with how we take care of each other as community, and the value systems that go beyond what money or some perceived curing of a symptom or trauma can do. So that's another space that I've been in, supporting, a lot of times volunteering and not necessarily getting paid, but in other capacities, sometimes getting paid, helping with retreats. Or one of the places that I support, we've had the indigenous who take care of the desert of Mexico and are the original holders of the wisdom of peyote for 3,000 years pre-civilization. We've also had the indigenous from Brazil, the Yamanawa tribe, who are the keepers of the Amazon, who are going now to the World Economic Forum and speaking at festivals in the world about how we can take care and maintain that land in the hands of the people who truly know how to care for it. So that's something that it's hard to quantify the value that it brings to my life and to the lives of pretty much every living being on this planet. And that's something that you can't put a dollar amount on outside of, feeding and housing people for a retreat or an experience.
For sure.
Yeah.
I wanted to ask you about, because I know that we kind of lightly touched on it when you were talking about, I bought another car because I was going to rent it out. Tell me what your plan was about that. Like, I had a business plan and it was going to look like this.
No, I did not have a business plan because I have an entrepreneurial spirit, but I also, that's something I'm still learning, is how to ground that into this reality. I just noticed that the prices of the commercial rentals were just going up and up and up. Whereas I had been able to find a deal mid 2020 with like Enterprise or Alamo, one of those companies. I was able to get a car for like $900 a month when I was shopping for vehicles, and I was starting to, go to see a client and offer them my work. And if I didn't want to hitchhike or pay 3 times as much as I could make in an hour for a taxi, I knew I needed a car. And I was paying like $900 a month for that. And then I had a friend who had work on her transmission and was renting from them, and it was costing her $1,400 for less than 2 weeks.
Wow.
That's a sustainable thing for someone who might be here for several months, who doesn't, have a business or, a lot of money coming in. And I just witnessed that, there are all these older cars like my own. If it's a car that drives well and has all of the necessary things, but someone doesn't mind that it's not cosmetically the most amazing looking thing, I could charge a lot less and I could make some money. And there were a few times actually, the month after I bought the car, which a week in the engine failed and I had to rebuild it twice. Again, I don't know where the breakdown in communication was, but, I will chalk it up to not doing my due diligence in that case. But I had a friend in the community who lives here, who's a transplant from Canada, and his mother has some health issues and they really needed to take her to a doctor and they don't have a car. And I was able to say, just take it. He ended up giving me some money, but I didn't ask for that.
Right.
And that was the real intention. There's so many of us who are trying to figure out, a lot of the people I know who are living in, for instance, the Diamante Valley where I used to live, are people who have chosen not to live a very wasteful, very modern life and just want to plant food and figure out how to raise everyone's quality of life from, there are some who have everything and some who don't have very much, to how can we all have the basic important things that we need, like healthy soil and water and air and fruit, that ultimately, if everything else fell apart, that's what we need.
Right.
And I recognize those are people who are not going out and trying to earn a living and trying to save money in a bank, and they're not always having access to easy transportation. So that was my intention. In the end, it kind of backfired for me. But the beauty was I learned how much in managing every single little fire I needed to put out, because, okay, the vehicle's been back on the road, back from the mechanic. Okay, he says it's great. I paid him the money. And then having someone renting it going, so it's not starting. The way I showed up in that process, I actually had people, even with the car breaking down on them, rent from me again.
Wow. Nice.
So I think that says more about what I've learned as the aspects of my character in that process. And I consider that a beautiful gift. However, it also was a learning experience in, sunk costs.
Well, one thing that you did that I did as well, like not for anybody other than my friend, was like dog sitting. And so it's a real thing, right? Like, so I don't know. I know very few people who live in Costa Rica that have not ended up with a Tico dog one way or the other. Like they just do their
right over there.
And they love everybody and they generally run their own lives, but the Tico dogs, but some of them need to be adopted and they get adopted. And so a good friend of mine, Susan, she lived in Costa Rica for 10 years. And she also worked there was a dog rescue called Dog. And so she volunteered there. And so she would end up fostering dogs and then adopting dogs. And so Susan ended up with 5 dogs of her own, one that she brought from the States with her. And then she had adopted 4 others and 2 cats. And so like when Susan needed to go back to the States or whatever, like she would always message me and go, Robin, if you're available, like I need to go to the States for like 3 weeks. Can you come down and stay with the dogs? Because most of them were geriatric dogs. They were, although they all went for a walk every morning and every evening, they all had specific medicines they had to have during the day and they had to eat certain ways. And one dog literally was allergic to chicken. Its skin would fall off. And the other ones could all have chicken. And some of them got scrambled eggs on their food and some got Parmesan cheese. And so there was a whole little cheat sheet of what was going on with the dogs. And so I would come in and stay at her house. And I literally would just work from her house. And I would just come there and stay for 3 weeks and I would work and me and the dogs would hang out and do whatever. And so it's one of those things where it's so important whenever someone who's in Costa Rica that has pets, like find someone reliable to love on their animals and take care of their belongings, that like once they find you, like they don't ever give you up.
Yeah, that is something I've done. It's actually even something I did when I was in the United States, because again, I could dog sit for a friend and client of mine who traveled 90% for work. And I was sometimes at his house more than he was. And my dog could come with me. Plus, I could come and go and see clients and go places. So I have done that. And it's interesting what you say about like people you trust, because I remember the first few months that I was here, the guy who I was renting a space from, I made a comment about like, what about house sitting and dog sitting? Like, do you know anyone? And he looked at me and he said, people aren't going to trust you till you've been here about a year. because there's so many people who are transient, so many people who commit to things. I've heard a lot of stories about like a cat sitter or a dog sitter who a day in changes their mind and just bails.
Yeah. And then the owner's stuck, right? Because they're in the States, they've already left, and their beloved pets are just stranded.
Yeah. Yeah. I've also seen the opposite too, though. That's really interesting is the different levels and layers of what people value things at. And I've seen a lot of people, because I dog sat, it was always paid in the United States. It was always a very unspoken understanding of, you're going to leave the space you pay for so that you can come live in my space and upend your entire routine and do the thing that benefits me so I can go live my life and take care of these living beings.
Right.
And so it was always an agreement that it was paid before there was any dates even expected. Here I've seen a few people, just because there are some people who are in that rhythm of just trying to make it work here. And I've seen them go, oh, I'm subletting my space and, you can watch my dogs. And it's like, wait, you want me to pay for that house? Or it's been really interesting to witness just the different ways in which people get by.
It's funny because that same friend, Susan, when one of her first dogs that she got wasn't even her dog. The house that she was renting, the people were from, I'm going to get it wrong, I'm going to say Sweden. We'll say Sweden. And they, at one point, didn't want to take their dog back with them. And so could they leave Paco there with her until their next trip, whatever. She had him for 7 years.
Wow.
They never came back for him.
Yeah. I have a similar situation. I actually have 2 dogs with me. One is the dog that I, said yes to in February of 2021. And it was beautiful because we knew each other from before then. So she's kind of like been on my path this whole time. And then we're pretty convinced that this other dog that I look after for friends when they're traveling, and they've decided they're going to relocate back to the States. So they're in the States and they're kind of waiting to get things really ready for him to come get him or have him delivered. But they're best friends, these 2, and we're convinced they must have a mother or father in common, because I know they're not from the same litter. And it's really lovely. They're super independent dogs, but also really well behaved. And every once in a while, I have to try to stop them from chasing things in the jungle. But yeah.
That's what's funny about Susan. So the first time I dog sat for Susan, the dogs just came and went as they wanted to. Like they weren't locked up anywhere. They just did whatever. They ran all over the mountain, whatever. There was 2 that were brother and sister. We called them the jungle pups. And they were constantly they would come back covered in mud. They would have found a waterfall somewhere or a mud hole somewhere and just be totally soaked. And then one of the next times I came, she was she'd moved to a different house, and they had to be walked on leashes. And I'm like, and they had never been walked on leashes with me ever before. And I was just like, that's weird. And so on the way back up to the house one day, I thought, we're just walking back to the house. We've already made our whole walk. And so I took them off their leashes because we were walking back to the house. Dude, they took off like someone shoved electric up their rear. I'm not kidding you. They were gone for hours. I'm like, oh my God. I think I just lost the dogs. I was like panicking, full bore panic, because I'm like, I don't know where they're at. I don't know how to find them. I don't know how to get them back. They eventually all came back, but I was like, holy crap. Okay, never off the leashes till we get back to the house. Now you guys cannot be trusted.
Oh my gosh. Yeah.
And I was a dog sitter for them for probably like 5 years. Like I would come and go for 5 years. And so like every time she was in a new house, every time she would like move every 12 to 18 months, and she'd be in a new house. And I'd be like, okay, what are the rules on this mountain? What are the rules with these people? And then she has this cat, which is a Bengal. His name is Hobbs. And Hobbs never had rules in his life. ever. But on this one mountain, I guess he had gotten into a fight with another cat. And so in the WhatsApp group, like they added me to it while I was there staying. And every night they would be going, is Hobbs put up yet? Because I need to let my cat out. And so I'd have to make sure in the evening. And you can't catch this bingo. Like when he comes around, like if he comes in to eat and then you're like shutting all of the things so that he can't get out, like you're locking him in. I'm like, okay, you can let your cat out. Hobbs is in now. And then one time he got out and wouldn't come back. And all over the mountain looking for him. I'm like yelling for him for a freaking cat. I'm yelling for him. And then finally, like this house that these people, I think they only came on the weekends, and they had a refrigerator outside, like under their carport, like an older one that was like rounded on the top. It wasn't square. And I'm like driving and I'm yelling for him. And then he like lifts his head. He's up asleep on top of this refrigerator. He's like, yeah. And then, so I had a friend with me who'd gone down to dog sit with me that time. And I'm like, okay, so I'm going to pick him up. And then I need you to open the door so I can put him, but make sure the windows and everything are rolled up. I'm going to get him in the vehicle. So we get
full
like,
mission.
Okay, he's a Bengal. He like stands on his hind legs and he's like 3.5, 4 foot tall. And I'm like, he has the ability to kill me if he wants to. He can literally just slice me the crap up. And so I'm like, okay, Megan, I'm going to open the doors and then you shut him as soon as I get in there. And then like, she finally, like we get him in there and get him back. But I was pretty sure he was going to demolish me before then. But every time she moved, I had a different set of rules with the dogs. It was hysterical.
Well, I just heard my dog barking, so I brought them over here. You can say hi.
Hi, buddies. Oh my gosh. They look just like Susan's jungle pups. They were little black matchy dogs like that.
There's so many. And it's so cute because the name for like a dachshund is essentially salchicha, and my dog has a lot of dachshund in her, so she's a salchicha, or they call mutts here saguados, and that's actually one of my favorite little tricks to recognize someone who's maybe a little fresh from the outside world. When they ask, what breed is your dog? I tell them it's a Rich Coast Terrier. And some people, it goes right on. Oh, wow, I've never heard of that breed.
Oh, my Lord. Yeah. All right. So we're going to get this wrapped up pretty soon. But I wanted to ask you, like, is there one thing that whenever you came down there, you thought, this is going to be a breeze? Like, I think I've got this thing dialed in, and ended up being way harder than you ever thought it would be.
No, I think I will say this. When I decided to stay, because I decided to stay at the very beginning of the whole world going into lockdown during COVID. And I decided to stay because someone shared some information with me that some people listening, if I were to share what this person had shared, would think you're a crazy person. The things that words and our mind can't quite make sense of, but mystical experiences, connection to spirituality, and, what some people call psychic abilities or channeling abilities. There is an entire quantum field of our existence that's beyond what our five senses can make sense of. And this person happened to just share some information with me and said, maybe just think about not going back right now. So I would say the first 2 years I was here, I was more just like avoiding a decision, because I knew the life that I had been living in the United States was okay, but it never quite served all my needs. Fortunately or unfortunately, that first 2 year period, I was just getting my bearings here. And then there was this turning point where I realized, wait a second, people keep reaching out to me going, oh, talk to Monique about that. She might have that for you or know someone who does. And that's when I realized I had actually created community for myself. I had actually networked enough to actually be a part of something that I wouldn't be, so full of myself to say that I had leadership and I knew some stuff, but it was very
You were
clear.
no longer a visitor.
Yeah, I lived here, right?
Yeah. I like when I've been there 2 years and then I finally realized I live here.
Yeah. I think because I was always maybe waiting for the other shoe to drop, or waiting for it to be impossible. Like, okay, it's a failure. And again, that says more about my internal story and the things I was moving through. But that's the piece I will tell you. I've had some beautiful like bits of wisdom just dropped in my lap from different people who've taught me different ways of seeing the world. And sometimes there's just these perfect pithy quotes. And one is, this place will compost you over and over and over. And so when we think about those of us who live in North American or, climates that are like that, we have summer, we have, the season of winter that's more dormancy. Stuff's happening, but it's a real slowdown. Mm-hmm. Here, right now is the green season or the wet season, which is essentially our winter. But, you see behind me, you pointed it out, the growing cycle never stops.
Right.
Some things may go dormant, some things may not be in season, but it is this constant cycle of growth. Right. And there's more oxygen here. There's just literally more stimulation of life happening here. And that also means whatever's going on here and here is going to be amplified. So if it's fear, worry, confusion, distortion, you're going to sit in that soup and face it. And if it's trust and joy and devotion or, whatever your values are, whatever the states of being that we as humans, ebb and flow and have the waves of, it's going to amplify that too. So I think it's this. If you think it's going to be easy, then you've never lived life anywhere because everything's a trade-off. Yeah. And what we may sacrifice in newer cars that are, for the most part, well maintained, right? If you have a good mechanic anywhere in the world, what we get in return is more raw nature and more conversations about how are we taking care of that nature and where are our blind spots around what we actually need or what the infrastructure can hold. And, where I lived in the United States, it was more, what car do you drive? Or what school does your kid go to? Right. And those are important things too. But I think it's really just, you choose your heart anywhere you are.
For sure. And, it's really great hearing you say that too, because I think that a lot of people that come to Costa Rica are running away from something and not necessarily running to something. And so what a great introspective there on going, whatever's going on in your brain, it's still going on here. You just have a lot more time to think about it, dwell on it. And then you decide, fix it, don't fix it. But either way, it's still your soup, right? It's still your bag of nuts that you brought with you. They still belong to you. You didn't leave them in the States.
There's a quote, I don't remember who, should be getting the credit for it, but it's I want to say it's probably from Buddhism. Wherever you go, there you are. All right. So, a lot of people are outrunning things, but, we see that everywhere. How many people move from relationship to relationship or move from job to job or move from one state to another state. And maybe it's to have better opportunities or to do better this time. But it takes a certain degree of honesty with self to acknowledge that, the common denominator in every experience that we have is that we're there.
Yeah. That's what I was going to say. The same thing. The common denominator is you. So if things are still crappy and things are still crappy, what's not going to be crappy the next time? I mean, are you going to change? Because it can't be everybody else's fault all the time.
And I think that's, it's funny, this Pura Vida concept has many definitions. It's kind of also like, one of the definitions. Yeah. But one of the definitions is, kind of like in the South, oh, bless your heart. It's not always like,
not always that gentle greeting.
Yeah. But the essence of it is this, so much of it often comes down to our own mindset. Mm-hmm. And, I can wake up, that whole thing with the story that you shared about the 4x4 mm-hmm. or your friend, the cat running away. If I'm in a headspace of failure or, anxiety, I'm going to perceive that experience very differently than if I'm in a space of, well, this is an interesting learning experience. What kind of an adventure will I have today?
Exactly.
I think that's what this place really affords us, is the raw confrontation of, well, if you need more learning experiences, you're going to get them.
For sure. For sure. I love it. Well, Monique, I appreciate your time today and your puppy's time, because I know they're being patient with you as well. And I just want to say thank you so much for being so generous and sharing of your time and your experience in Costa Rica. I can't wait to meet you face to face. And we all want to say every time, Pura Vida. It's funny. The one thing I want to jump in here real quick is the guy the Tico that we bought our property from in Golfito. I'm a super direct communicator. And so sometimes I forget the pleasantries that need to happen at the beginning and the end of a sentence. I may just pop in and go, hey, did we get blah, 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 blah today? And he'll go, good morning, Pura Vida. I'm like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. Pura Vida, good morning. How are you? And I forget those things. I'm just communicating. Like I'm just, and I forget that part of it. And he was so gracious after we bought the property, we came down, for a visit afterwards. And he goes, I want to make you and your family breakfast when you're down here. And this guy is literally a multimillionaire. Like he just is. And he owns some properties down in Golfito with amazing views. And I thought like he wanted us to come to his house and have breakfast or whatever, but he didn't. He set up this tent and this gorgeous, he rolled out a rug so we wouldn't be standing on the ground. And he brought all the cooking stuff up there. And with the view of the Gulf of Doce, like he literally made us this gorgeous breakfast right there overlooking the bay. Like this, I mean, he had his chef's cap on and everything. And so I have to remember like to communicate in a proper way, like with him, like he's a gentle soul and like he's wanting me to say good morning to him. And I'm just like, hey, Marvin, do we have blah, blah, blah? We got the certificate of blah, blah, blah back. And he's like, Pura Vida, good morning. Like, slow down, yeah. Robin. Let's be nice to each other first. And so it's always a lesson for me. It takes me like a couple of days to go back to acclimating to not being so Western civilization freaking bulldog just doing stuff. And so I love that. I don't resent it ever. I'm just like, dang it, I did it again. I'm like, gosh darn it, Robin. Remember to be polite, Robin. So it takes me back to like these people just are like they're not tasked or any task driven when they're communicating. They're just like, hello, how are you today? Are you guys I hope you had a great Father's Day, all those things. And so I love that about the culture. And I love it whenever I'm very mindful to remember that stuff and to be polite and conscientious of that. So anyways, I'm so glad we got to share some time, and we're going to drop a bunch of stuff in the show notes, but if you guys have any questions whatsoever, just leave them on here. I will forward them over to Monique. And if you need someone to love on your dogs and you're in the Ojochal area, Oviedo area, probably anywhere around there, she'll probably do a great job. Come love on your pets for you. But other than that, Pura Vida. Thank you, Monique.
Thanks so much.